Okay, so if you are watching this, thank you for tuning in to learn a little bit about gamification. I'm Kaylee, I work out at Crestemere, and this is something that I'm really passionate about and I'm excited to share with other people. So presentation slides are available at this Google link if you want to check those out. I've been teaching at Crestemere School in Wolf Creek for 3 years. I've taught every subject, I've taught every grade from 6 to 9, and this is something that I fully believe anybody can do. I'm a gamer, self-proclaimed nerd, but you don't have to be in order to do gamification. So what is it? Gamification is basically just applying any kind of game element like points, rules of play, competition into your classroom. And the first way to do that is Classcraft. So this is the first part of the presentation. I'm going to walk you through how to use this. And Classcraft is awesome because games are such an integral part of our culture nowadays. We've got 59% of Canadians playing video games and 48% of those are women. I think there's this big misconception that girls don't like video games and only boys play games. I played way more games as a kid than my brother ever did, so I definitely don't fit into that stereotype at all. The average kid, according to current statistics, plays 10,000 hours of games by the time that they're 21, which is the same amount of time that they spend in school. So if they're spending this much time in games, why wouldn't we, harness that interest and that passion and bring it into the classroom? If you want to make an account, you'd go to classcraft.com, and to sign up and make an account is entirely free. There is a premium version, which I do have, and I will demonstrate some of those features, but the free version gives you access to all the essential things that you'd want anyways. So if you make an account and you sign in, this is the landing page that you will get. Classcraft sometimes puts in new features or different tips and tricks, which they put into this news feed here on the side. So if you want to learn more about those things, you can do that. Your classes that you create will show up here on the left-hand side. So I've got 2 homerooms. I've got grade 7 and then an 8-9 split. So I'm going to look at my 8-9 class, and these are all of my student players. I can choose to look at them as individual players. So here I have Coulter, or I can choose to show them in a class list for easier and quicker access, or I can look at them as a team. So the number one thing about Classcraft is that your students absolutely have to be in teams in order for it to work because it is a cooperative game. When your students log in, all of them will need to pick a class or a character type.
Hi.
Hi. So there are 3 different character types. There are warriors, there are healers, and there are mages. Each team needs to have at least one of those types of characters in it in order for that team to be the most successful. And when you introduce this to your class, you would need to explain what each of these 3 types are capable of, what their different attributes are, and what powers would be available to them to learn. So you can see here on this team, the fire-breathing rubber duckies, we have a warrior, a healer, a mage, and then another healer. So these are the roles that they've chosen for themselves. When you look at an individual student, so if we look at Aiden here, he's a mage, he's level 6. So these are the important parts of each student's character. They have HP, which stands for health points. They have AP, which stands for ability points. XP, experience points, and GP is their gold pieces. So the object of Classcraft is for students to continually level up by earning experience points in order to gain advantages or powers. I'll cover the powers a little bit later, but the way that they level up is through earning XP, and that is through positive behaviors or positive actions in the classroom. So Aiden does something good. I want to reward him for that. So when I click add XP, I'm going to get an automatic list of all of the nice things that he could have done in my classroom to earn him some XP. Pretty minor things, correctly answering a question in class would get him 25 XP. Meeting his monthly AR goal, which is huge, would get him 500. If none of these things apply to the nice thing that he did, I can enter a custom value over here. So I could give him 100 points. For example, at my school on Spirit Days, the kids who participate and show school spirit get 100 points for that particular day. On the opposite side, if they do something negative, you remove their HP. So Aiden did not bring his agenda to class. He forgot it. So I'm going to subtract 5 from him. Actually, we're going to go into the demo class so I can show you what this looks like. Every Classcraft account comes with a demo class for you to play around with. It's just some preset students that you can adjust just to see how things work. So this guy, Eric, he hasn't been doing so good. He has 1 health point, and then he didn't do his homework. He needs 20 health points or he's going to fall in battle. So the consequence when students lose all of their health points is they fall in battle. Basically, they die. And when they die, they fall in battle. Oh, Eric is lucky. He gets nothing. Classcraft will automatically generate a consequence or a sentence for them to fulfill in order to be revived. Those consequences can be whatever you want them to be, depending on how cruel and malicious you want to be to your students. I make some of my kids sing in front of the class. That is universally hated. Nobody wants to sing in front of the class ever. Another one is they don't have a chair for the day. That one, they're always like, oh, I can do that. I don't need a chair. And then 20 minutes later, they're begging me to sit down. So there is nothing. Once in a while, a lucky kid gets nothing, so he doesn't have a consequence. But the other result of that is when one person on the team falls, everybody else loses 10 HP. So this is where the team support thing comes into effect. The other kids don't want to be negatively impacted by their peers, and they don't want to fall in battle either. So because all of these people were already at 1 and Eric died, now when I apply the damage, all of them are going to fall as a result. So she has to learn and recite a poem. He's going to have to copy a text. Oh, detention. Those are all just the automatic ones that Classcraft puts in. Go back to my class. There are powers that allow kids to protect each other from falling in battle. So I'll actually go ahead and look at the powers now. So when the kids first log in, they each get automatic access to 1 power that they start with from one of the basic ones. So as a mage, these are the 3 that you have to choose from to start. So if you pick teleport, you get to trade places with any other kid for 1 class. I do have seating plans in my classrooms. This is nice for them. They get to go sit by their friend. As they level up, they earn these little symbols, which mean that they get to learn a new power. As they move up in level, the powers or rewards get better. So clairvoyance, all of the team members get a hint on an exam question. The mage can erase a low score from their grades. Can't be used on big exams or projects, but didn't do so hot on that one assignment, you can just make it disappear. As the powers move up, they require more AP to cast. And so that's this blue meter here, the ability points. That is what students have to spend in order to use their powers. So the larger powers cannot be used every day because they cost so much. AP does slowly regenerate. Mine is set to 3 every day. They gain 3 back because they have to get it back somehow once they use it all up. The gold in the free version doesn't really do too much. It does allow them to buy different outfits for their avatar, which doesn't really do anything for them, but they really, really like it. And some of them really take a lot of creative liberty with what their person looks like, and it's exciting for them. So it's a big deal over what your person is wearing and how cool or exciting you look. In the premium version, you can, which I have, you can award gold for whatever you want. And the gold allows them to do different things with their pets, which you can see my students have. This guy has a pet down here, which the free version does not have. So I will show you how to customize everything to fit your classroom. So when you're looking at your home page, there's a little dot button beside. You can click on your settings, and this is where you can edit everything. So your students, you can set up your accounts in advance before you actually have them log in. So I made all of my student accounts and then just gave them the student code and they got all logged in. So they were already kind of set up and ready for them to go. The teams, you can change at any time. So when the kids are put into teams, they get to pick a team name. So these guys went with the murderous demons. They get to pick their crest and they get to pick a background for their characters. You can change these by clicking and dragging, and you can add teams or get rid of teams at any time. Classcraft does have the ability to involve parents. I have not done this because I don't find I have enough parents that are interested and really want to connect with it, but I think especially for younger grades, this might be really useful. If you invite the parents, they can see at home when kids are gaining XP and losing HP. If you have a student that's losing HP all the time for not getting their homework done or for always constantly disturbing others, that might open up some conversation at home for the parent as to, well, why is this always happening? You know, what problems is my kid having at school? And so it does help keep them in the loop in regards to what their child's doing in the classroom. So you can invite them to join.
In the free account as well as premium?
I'm pretty sure in the free, yep. Okay, so this is where you can modify what students can gain or lose points for. Classcraft comes with a preset list of recommendations. You don't have to use any of them. You can change the amounts at any time. So I might decide that, okay, I kind of overestimated here. That's not worth 500. So I would click on that and I can change it or just completely delete it and add new ones at any time. Same thing with your HP, that you can customize all of them, and same thing with gold, which this is only in the premium version. Your powers, half are customizable, half are not. The ones that you cannot edit are purposely that way because they are the powers that affect other people on your team in terms of their stats. So like this one, the mana transfer, I can't change this because it gives their other team members 7 AP. That's just part of the game's function in order to keep things balanced among their stats. If it's got the pencil here, these ones I can edit them. So I could change the name of the power, I can change what it does, and I can change how much AP it's worth. And so sometimes throughout the year, I change up the powers, like I give them access to new ones. One thing I think that's really valuable is to involve the students in deciding what their powers are going to be. So after we used Classcraft last year, my kids knew what it was. So at the very beginning of the school year this year, I said, okay, what do you guys want? What do you want for powers? What do you want to earn? And that gives them some ownership over how the game is going to work and what they can work towards throughout the school year. So one thing that they all wanted was this concealment one where they become invisible and then they get to do something other than read for 20 minutes during their reading time. Portal, they wanted this one. Their entire group gets to go work in the hallway. That was highly desirable for some reason. So these most of them can be adjusted and you can change them throughout the year. The sentences are the consequences they get when they fall in battle, when they lose all of their HP. So dance enthusiastically for 1 minute to a song selected by another team. That one everyone loves except for the person who has to do it. Dramatically recite a poem that I select. Again, everyone else loves that one except for the person that gets it. And you can add as many as you want and change those at any time. On to daily events. So before we look at those, I will show you what the actual thing looks like. So I do these every day with my students. It's something fun to start our class in the morning. So once they walk in, I say, okay, let's do our daily event. Here we go. The Horde, 2 arms, everyone loses 10 HP. And this is where they all groan and complain. When you hit next, it will automatically apply it to every student so that you don't have to. I'm not actually going to do that or my kids are going to wonder why they all lost 10 HP after school for no reason. But if you've got more than one class in a day, you go back to it, it'll give you a new one. So it'll be different for every class throughout the day. And some of them are only geared towards one person, like it might target one individual, it might target a whole team, it might affect the entire class. There are ones that affect the teacher. I did have to sing a song to my class last year. I had to sing What Does the Fox Say? It was super embarrassing, but they loved it. So it just creates that element of surprise and adds a little bit of fun into the overall atmosphere. So if we go back to our settings, in the random events, you can change them. There's 80. And you can delete any, change them, add your own, whatever you want. In the advanced game rules, this is where you can change all of the stats. So your class, depending on how often you see your students and how long your classes are and what your expectations are, you may need to change some of these things. just so it's fair. So I decided that my students need to gain 2,000 XP in order to level up, because I do see them every day and I see them for several classes a day. So I said a little bit higher. You could lower that. Or if you had a homeroom, you might need to make it even higher so that kids aren't leveling up too fast. Also depends on how generous you are with your XP. The amount of HP regained every day, I set that at 0. My kids don't magically regain HP. A team member has to heal them, or they have to get it from daily events. AP regeneration, how much AP they get back every night, how much HP they have after they fall in battle, etc. So those are all customizable, as are the base stats for each character type. Then there's other things you can change in terms of like the language or other aspects of the game. The last thing, actually 2 last things I will show. Wheel of Destiny. This is awesome. So if you have a daily event that requires a random student or a random team, you can use the Wheel of Destiny to pick a random player. You can pick another one. Or you can pick a random team. So if you need a group of kids to volunteer for something, oh, Ice Warriors, that's you. Sorry. You guys have to go do the terrible thing that no one wanted to volunteer to do. The best example I can think of in which this thing has totally saved me was actually yesterday. We had hot lunch day at our school. We had hot dogs. There were 6 hot dogs left over that were brought to my classroom. I said, who wants an extra hot dog? And there were like 12 kids that want one. And I know that I cannot pick kids because they will all say that I'm being unfair or I'm being biased. So Wheel of Destiny picked the kids who got hot dogs. Nobody complains when I use this to pick people because they know that it's fair and they know that it's random and it's different every time. So there's no arguing, there's no complaining. It's, oh, the wheel picked that person. They get a hot dog. I don't. I'm not going to whine about it. So I do love this. Also use it to pick kids to answer questions in class when you have some reluctant people that don't want to answer. There's a couple other features. This is premium access only. So the countdown and the stopwatch are exactly what they sound like. But I do like to set the timer for kids sometimes when they're working on assignments, and that does seem to motivate them a little bit. But the boss battles are the thing I really love about premium. So I will go to my demo class so we can actually see what this looks like. Once you make a boss battle, it's accessible to any of your classes. So even if you have more than one class, if you make a boss battle, you can use it between all of them. So we did figurative language. This is the boss. So you get to pick the boss that they fight. There's a whole bunch of different ones to choose from. And you can have it battle students individually or teams. I always go with teams so that the kids can work together, and it's a little, it doesn't quite put them on the spot as much. So this fire stalker is going to fight the teams. So first question, the comfortable meerkats have to answer it. So her hair was a golden stream down her shoulders. I would ask them, they would get to collaborate. They would give me an answer. And then, oh, okay, good job. You got it right. So if you get it right, you attack the boss. If you get it wrong, the boss attacks you. And then that team loses HP. So you actually take that damage, which could cause you to fall in battle. If you get all the way through, you answer all the questions, you defeat the boss, so you knock out all the boss's HP, you win XP and gold as a prize. My kids love doing these. They get really excited about them. And if you get a flawless victory, you get no questions wrong, you get double the XP and double the gold. And my kids love trying to get a flawless victory every time. So I've really enjoyed the boss battles. I think the premium version is worth it for those. It's more fun than doing a test, something a little bit different than a Kahoot too for a review. So that is Classcraft. There are some other features like grade books, messaging, things like that. I don't particularly use these things because of, you know, Fresh Grade and other tools that I have. So I don't use them, but they look like they would be handy for someone that wanted them. I guess the analytics, this lets you track the amount of XP and other stat changes. So you can see over the course of a week or a month what people have gained every day. So it can track student progress this way. So that is Classcraft. It is awesome and I love it. I've been doing it for 2 years and I plan on continuing to do it in the future. Now, even though Classcraft is great, it is really only gamification of behavior. It doesn't modify or change anything that you actually do in terms of content or classroom learning activities, which is where content gamification comes in. So I went to Scott Hebert's presentation at 21CTLS in September on a Friday and was so inspired that I did this on a Monday. I implemented this in my own classroom because I loved it so much. And it's just taking your curriculum and turning it into an ongoing story or challenge. And it really is super engaging for the kids and motivating, I think, is the biggest part of it. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want. Mine is probably medium amount of effort. Scott's is maximum. I don't even have the time or the energy to do what he does, but it is really cool. And it's just the possibility of what you can do. When I started, I was kind of overwhelmed. I'm like, I don't know like what steps to take or how to go about this. So this is the process that I ended up doing and it worked for me. So this is what I would recommend. It definitely doesn't have to be done in any particular order. The nice thing about gamification is it's entirely up to you. It's all up to your creativity. It's up to your classroom atmosphere and what you want to do with it. So when I say decide how much you want to do, I mean in terms of length. So you can choose to gamify a single lesson or something over the course of a couple days. You can choose to do an entire unit, or if you're a rock star, you can do an entire year, which is what Scott did. That's kind of what I'm doing now, but you need to decide how long it's going to run. The next thing that I did was create my website, which I made on Weebly. It's awesome. It's free. I like it because my kids already use it for their blogs, so they understand how it works, and it's pretty easy to navigate. So I will show you my website in a moment. Then you have to decide what your teams are going to be. Again, this really does only work if you have teams in the way that I do it, because they hold each other accountable, and the teams are what make all of the challenges fun because it creates that element of competition. I call mine guilds, but you can call them teams or groups or whatever you want. Creating a leaderboard. This is what keeps track of all of the points throughout your unit or throughout your year. You can create items if you want. Those are optional. I will show you how to do that. You need an introduction for your students because they will not know what you are doing with this. It will probably be new to them. So you need to show them what it's going to look like, what your expectations are. Scott did this big elaborate video with like Lord of the Rings movie clips. I loved it. I didn't have time for that. So I did just a slides presentation and that was fine. You have to decide what your first quest is going to be, what that's going to look like, and then just have fun with it and tweak things as you go. I'm figuring a lot of it out as I go and making it up, and that seems to work just fine. So this is my website on Weebly, and I'm actually going to take you there. So I made this. It didn't really take me too long because it's always a work in progress as you go through the unit. You do not need to have all of this up front by any means. So I created the landing page, Renaissance Europe, and I decided all of my kids were going to be peasants in France at the very, very beginning of the Renaissance. So they don't know this is Monty Python. I did, and I laugh a little bit every time I look at it. They just assume these are some dudes from the Middle Ages, so that's fine. This story, all about the Black Death arriving in Europe, pretty much straight out of the textbook, and then added a bit at the end about, you know, you're going to embark on a journey. You kind of have to sell this to the kids and get them excited and pull them into what you're going to do. And if you want to discover your journey, this is going to seem overwhelming, but I just added a piece at a time. So this is the story, and I will talk about this more later, but I have tabs for all the different parts. This website is the home base for everything that they do throughout the entire unit. This has all their resources, everything they need to be successful. And these are public, so other people can look at these and use what I have. You can steal whatever you want. If you are teaching the Renaissance, lucky you, because it's all here. So their quests show up here, showing the amount of XP that they're worth. So these are all their assignments, which I will show later. Items, puzzles and riddles, and then the access to the leaderboard, the link to the leaderboard. So it's all there for the kids. They can see this at any time, and they always know that it's there. Teams, teams of 4 to 6 are best. Any bigger than that, and when they're working on things together, it'll get out of control. There's too many kids in one group, and then you inevitably have those few that don't do any work. So I have 5 teams of 4. I think 4 is a really, really good number, but if you had a larger class, you might have to go a little bit bigger than that. You need to spread out your academic and lower students in order to keep things balanced. So if you put a whole bunch of strong kids in one group, they will dominate. And the problem with that is if one team gets way too far ahead of all the rest, the other ones will give up because they don't see any point in trying if they think that they've already lost. Because it is an ongoing competition. When I created all of this to motivate them, I said the team with the most XP at the end of the unit gets a pizza party. And so that's the end goal, is to have the most XP at the end. And because it's your whole team, everybody wants to work together and they want to beat all of the other teams. So they do need to be fair, and the kids need to feel that the teams are fair. So if they perceive one team to be dominant, then they give up because they don't think, well, we can't do better than that team.
Would you ever let your kids pick their own team?
No.
No?
Not with the group that I have.
Yeah.
I think maybe in other classes that might work. With my group, definitely not, because they would all just choose to work with their friends, and not that they aren't with some of their friends in their groups, but they would probably not be successful. I don't think they could work very well together.
Yeah.
The very first quest, I think, should be some kind of team identity assignment. So here's an example of what I mean by that. Renaissance, the very first part of the story was all about heraldry in the Middle Ages and the symbols that knights had on their shields and what those things meant, and chivalry and everything else. So we talked about that, they learned about it, and then in their teams, their task, their very first quest was to create their own unique coat of arms. They had to come up with a team name. And I do actually input these team names into Classcraft. So that's their Classcraft team as well. Like, it synchronizes between both things. They had to come up with a Latin motto. They had to pick a symbol for each of the 4 quadrants and colors. And then on the back, they had to write up a justification as to why they picked all of these things and what that said about them as a team. Kind of helps them bond. It sets up that team, I guess, strength and identity right from the get-go. So they all feel kind of unique and like tied to their teammates. So they made all of these. I hung them up in the classroom so that they were there. And that's their team name. And that's what everyone refers to them as throughout the rest of the unit. So this was the first assignment. I do change their teams between units so that they don't have to work with the same kids the entire year. I think that might get tiresome for some of them. So when we started Spanish and the Aztecs after the Renaissance, they all got put into groups with entirely new teams. And their new identity assignment was, okay, you're sailing from Spain to New Spain, to Mexico. You're going to go meet the Aztecs. And so you need to create a ship flag and name your ship. And that's your team. And so they are your crewmates. And one of them is the captain, and, so on and so forth. So that was like their new sense of identity. I have those hanging in my room now in place of the coat of arms. So the quests is just another word for assignments, except they don't do assignments, they go questing, because students are always questing in search of the knowledge or the skills that they need in order to meet some kind of a goal or objective. And rather than marks, they earn experience points, XP. So we should already be familiar with that from Classcraft. The XP that they earn is proportional to the grade that they would receive. My kids obviously still get grades, like I have to have marks to put on their report cards, but on the leaderboard and everything else, it's all referred to as XP. And I write an amount of XP on the top of their pages that I hand back to them after I've marked something. So when you make a quest or an assignment, you have to decide how much XP you want it to be worth. Smaller things I set at 100. The biggest ones I set at 500, like a really large group project would maybe be worth 500. If you have a quest worth 100, student gets 90% on it, then you would obviously just make that proportional. They get 100, or they get 90 XP out of 100. And you just input that into your leaderboard as you go so that they can keep track. Quests can be as structured or as open-ended as you want. So I know some people feel more comfortable with really structured assignments, like this is exactly what you need to do, and quests can still be like that. Or it can be a man approaches you and he says, we need you to teach our community about this, help us. And then that's it. There's like no instructions. And the kids have to go about figuring out how they're going to do that. And that's part of the quest is, well, how do I show my knowledge? How do I show what I know? Or how do I meet this objective? So the way that you do your assignments and projects in the classroom doesn't have to change. The amount of work that you assign doesn't have to change. It's basically just turning it into a quest so that they can earn the experience in order to move forward. So an example of that, in Spanish and the Aztecs, we just did a group quest where they had to interview some Aztecs. So one person was the interviewer, the other three in the group were each a different role in Aztec society. So one person might be a slave, one might be the emperor, one might be a noble or a warrior or a commoner or whatever. And they recorded it on WeVideo, put pictures over top and made it into kind of a podcast interview. But I left it very open-ended. I'm like, interview these Aztec people so that we can learn about their worldview and their society. And so the variety in between all the interviews that I got was awesome. And the assignments, like the finished products, were amazing. They were so well done. I was really, really proud of the work that they did. And that was just a group quest that they had to complete before we moved on.
I have a question here.
Yes.
From Classcraft. Can teachers share? So can you have multiple teachers in one class?
No. Unfortunately, you cannot, unless you signed up for it using an email and then gave that password to another person so that they could log in as well, and then you could do it that way. Hope that answers that question. Okay, the leaderboard, I just use Google Sheets. You could use Microsoft Excel or whatever spreadsheet software you want to use, but you need to keep track of their XP for each quest, and then you need a running group total so that they can see where they stand at any given time compared to the other teams. You also keep track of any bonuses they earn and any gold. I will explain what the gold is for shortly. This is what mine looks like. So this is available to my students at all times. They can always check, and I always have it updated. And so I've got them in their groups with their names of each kid, and then I've got the amount of gold each kid has along with how much each group has. Please ignore my bad math because I'm seeing right here now I didn't add this one up. I probably added some and then forgot to change the total.
I need to show you how to use
I'll show you
formulas.
I do have formulas, just not for the gold because it, anyways, doesn't matter. But I do use formulas for all of this, like all the XP, just not the gold. So I've got, okay, quest 1 was their ship flag. That XP or that quest was worth 300. And that was a group project where they got 1 mark. So this shows how much they earned for that particular quest. The vocabulary is an individual student assignment. So each kid gets their own mark out of 100 XP, what they earned. And then they get a group total for how much they earned collectively. Same thing with the map. Then the Aztec interview. I took the screenshot before I marked it, but here's their standing. So I just use a formula that adds all of this up. And then that was our first quest set on People of the Sun, the Aztecs. We're moving forward now onto the Spanish. That'll be quest set 2. I have them in sets because after a set, that's when we have a quiz. And so it's like a natural break before we move on to like the next topic or the next part. Oh wait, actually I'm gonna go back. These kids with the yellow means they haven't handed something in. So this leaderboard is amazing because it's a constant reminder to those kids that forgot to hand something in or didn't finish something. And that like bright yellow box is horrifying to them and their team. And it's like, oh my God, I need to get that done right away. So at the end of my Renaissance unit, I had, out of all the assignments we did, which was a lot, like we did 4 months worth of lots of different things, I had 1 girl missing 1 thing. Wow. Every single other thing was done and done well. And, you know, like when we got really close to the end of the unit, I had kids coming up and saying, I didn't do very well on that 1 thing I handed in. I didn't get very much XP. Can I redo it and hand it in again? I'm like, yeah, please do that. And I gave kids right up until the final exam to hand in anything to be reassessed or to hand in something that was missing. So the day before, I had a couple kids that were missing some stuff and they were frantically like, can I stay in at recess? I got to get it done. And because they wanted to win and they could see that they were so close. And it's that motivation of I can beat somebody if I do my map assignment, that's all I need to do. And suddenly that map assignment doesn't seem like such a big task anymore to get done. So all this work came piling in and it all got done. And I was amazed because I have a lot of kids who chronically like do not do their homework ever, never hand anything in. And they do not care if they get a 0 on an assignment or like no mark on their report card, but they hate having an empty spot on this leaderboard and pulling down the rest of their team. So this has been a huge motivator for them and it's been fantastic. All right, the items. I stole most of these from Scott Hebert, so I really can't take credit for a lot of these. He used a Magic the Gathering card generator, so I've included the link. It's really simple. You name the card, you pick a picture to go in it, you say whether or not it's like a weapon or a power or an enchantment, and then you give the description of what it does. This is a lot of work to do up front. So it did take me several hours to make all of these in the computer and then another couple hours to print them, laminate them, and cut them out. I enlisted the help of kids to do that actually, and that saved me a lot of time. The nice thing though is once they're done, you have them, and I got to reuse basically all of my cards from the first unit for the second one. I got all of them back. None of them got lost. The kids take pretty good care of them. So the items, even though they're optional, I would recommend doing them because they create that element of surprise and they can influence guild ranking in addition to assignments. So typically kids only earn XP for their work. If one group is feeling kind of behind, they get the right card, that can bump them up. And that can be kind of that little boost that they need to feel like they're back in the game. And they can be a reward. So these are just a couple examples of ones that I have. And you will have several different types or categories of items. So the crafting ones are really basic things like iron or wood or rope, leather. And I made a ton of these. Like when I started, I think I made about 10 of each of the crafting supplies. And they are considered common. So they are cheap for the students to purchase. They're easy to collect. But how they work is kids have to bring me 2 or more of the crafting items and tell me what they want to make out of them. So it's a little bit of like a creative, critical thinking thing. So kids will bring me timber and iron and say, Miss Bowie, can I make a spear? And I'm like, yeah, that'll work. That sounds okay. So I give them a spear card. Sometimes they bring me stuff and they say, okay, I want to make a sword. I'm like, well, I don't have a sword card, so here you go. And they get a pink sticky note with sword written on it, along with what the sword does and my initials, and that's their card. Because sometimes they come up with things that I didn't think to make. But if it works, I'll give it to them. I have declined some kids. They're like, I want to make this. I'm like, that makes no sense. No, you cannot have that. I'm sorry. I did have one kid bring me leather and a pitchfork. And he says, I take my pitchfork and I stab holes in the leather and I use it to pan for gold. I was like, sure, okay. So he had to roll some dice to determine how much gold he found panning with his leather with holes in it, and that satisfied him. So that's the crafting items. The weapons to attack other groups. Let's just everyone know right now that I don't let them physically attack people. There's no stabbing in my classroom. They are things that allow them to attack other groups during guild battles, which causes other teams to miss a turn or suffer some kind of damage that might put them behind. XP modifiers are any cards that give teams bonus XP or inflict damage on another team's XP. So the freezing potion one, for example, you play that on someone else, it freezes the XP they would get for a quest. They don't get any. So they get nothing for that particular one. The special powers are the fun ones. I only made 1 of each of these because they should only be used once per unit by 1 kid that has earned it. And these ones are really hard to obtain. So I think the best example is the invisibility cloak. The kid that gets this gets to use it during a test where they become invisible for 1 minute and they get to walk around and look at everyone else's test.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was the kid that got this. I made it available like right at the very end, right before the unit exam. So he used it. And so he's like sprinting around the room looking at everyone else's pages. And I mean, they don't even know if people's answers are right or not. I'm like, you might be looking at Buddy behind you and maybe he has all the wrong answers, but they think it's great. And I'm like, you're invisible. No one can see you. So people can't cover up their page or whatever. So the special powers are fun. There's ones that make other teams like lose an item or, you know, have to do something crazy. There's one that allows them to change another team's guild name. which is why we have the fire-breathing rubber duckies from before, because that was inflicted upon them by another team. In the first unit, Enders Victors became the mouth breathers. They didn't like that very much. And there is a card that lets them change it back, but they never got it. So they were the mouth breathers for the remainder of the unit. It was really sad. So this is what they look like up close. These are all available on my website. So people could just copy them, or they can make their own, and they can be whatever you want. So kids can earn items in a variety of ways. They can earn them through mini guild challenges. I do these almost daily, and they're just fun, quick little competitions. I say, okay, I need one person from each guild to come up to the front of the room. So they send one kid up. I make sure it's a different one every time. Like, everybody has to go. They get up there, and then I tell them what the challenge is. So they don't know until they get up there. And I say, okay, today it's categories. Category is countries of the world. I give them like 10 seconds to think about it. We start, go. If a kid repeats one that's already been said, or they say something that's not a country, like all my kids cannot remember that Africa is not a country, then they're out. Last person left standing wins, they get an item. I hide them around the classroom sometimes in kind of like secret places. I give them out as payment for a class job. So you can have kids apply for roles or jobs within the classroom, like classroom cleanup, Chromebook cart checker or monitored, making sure that all the Chromebooks are plugged in and the cart is full, right? So they do that job for a week or 2 weeks, and then they get this item as payment. They can be bought at the shop. That's my fancy way of saying I put some cards out on my desk, and I call each team up one at a time and say, what would you like to buy with your gold? Scott has like an actual like shop in his classroom. I don't have that kind of effort at all, but this is where the gold is necessary. So they earn gold also from the guild challenges or solving puzzles, and I will have some examples of that. But once a week, I put some cards out. I decide how much they cost. I call each group up one at a time. I say, this is how much gold you have. What do you want to buy? And then as a team, they have to work together to decide what cards would benefit them the most. And it's hilarious listening to them bicker over what it is that they can buy. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not going to help us though. And it's like, yeah, but I want that. It looks cool. And eventually one kid finally goes, we're just going to save our money, and then walks away and sits down. They can get items through solving riddles or puzzles or extra credit assignments. So you could put out some extra credit things, extension assignments or projects, and say you get this item by completing this for those, you know, eager kids you have in your class, or maybe like sponge activities, right? Some extra work for those kids that want to do it. The puzzles are optional. I do them almost every day. I think I do it more for me because I like making them. But they are good for critical thinking skills, and they're really great for those kids that need an extra challenge, that need a brain teaser, or that they're done their work early all the time. And you can tie them into what you're doing with your curriculum. So I have some examples. This is not necessary. Like, I did this because I really like to draw on my whiteboard.
Yes, and that is on the whiteboard. That's what amazes me.
Yeah. I got a really nice set of whiteboard markers for Christmas because that's what my family gives me as gifts. And I was thrilled because now I get to draw nicer things. So when we started our Spanish and Aztecs unit, this was the first puzzle they did, because the part of the story that they were currently on is that they were making their way across the ocean. So you're inspecting your cabin and your new ship. You find a secret compartment under the floorboards. Inside is a lockbox. 4 numbers are scratched into the bottom, but a 5th is required to open it. So I put these on the board after school. They come in the morning, and kids literally mob, like they congregate around the whiteboard first thing in the morning because they want to be the first one to see what the puzzle is. And then it's like a mad race to solve it. And often they are quite tricky. And so once kids finish their work, then they set about to trying to figure out what the answer is. So for a puzzle like this, I'd say, okay, the first person to come and give me the correct answer and tell me why it's correct, like they can't just guess. And usually kids only get one guess. Like, they can't just come up to me 1,000 times and say every single number, but they get an item or they get gold. So that one was a number puzzle. This is like a spatial one, right? Looking at shapes. This one is a word puzzle, figuring out this letter code. And I leave them up until someone solves them. This one was really hard. It's a shifted letter code. So all the letters were shifted over 1 in the alphabet. It's look past Beethoven. I have a Instagram Beethoven post on the bulletin board at the back of my classroom. I put the item card behind it. So you had to look past it. They had to like take it off the wall and the card was hidden behind it. So this one was up for a week before somebody finally figured it out. So I do those. The kids really like them. And if I don't do one, like on the one day here and there where I don't have time to do one after school, they're like, what? There's no puzzle? I'm like, no, I'm sorry. They really enjoy them. Battles. There's two different types of battles. There's boss battles, which I'm going to talk about first. So quizzes are mini bosses. Exams are boss battles. The boss has a certain number of HP, health, which is the number of questions that you have determined is required to pass the quiz or the test. I don't set it at 50%. I set it at 65 because I just have high standards. So they have to get 65 at least in order to pass. It makes the test a little bit less intimidating by making it part of the game. And they're thinking more about defeating the boss than they are passing the test. And it provides motivation to succeed because if they lose to the boss, if it kills them, they lose all their gold. And they don't like that. Yeah. So this is an example of what it looks like. I put this on the front of the quiz. So when we're doing Renaissance, oh no, Silk Road Bandits. They've attacked you. What are you going to do? This is how much HP they have. This is what you have to get to pass the test. So when we mark them afterwards, every time they get a question right, they get to strike out one of those hearts on their bosses until they have defeated them. So it's that sense of accomplishment, like I beat the boss. So maybe they did only get 70 or 65 or 70%, but they beat the boss and they're happy about that. And then we've got guild battles, which are challenges between the groups, between the guilds. I do these usually on Fridays because they're just kind of for fun. The prize is almost always bonus experience. So it's like, okay, first place, you get bonus 200 XP, second place gets 100. So they can be review games, they can be physical games, like you could do them in the gym, you could do them outside. I've done card games, I've done Jenga, Hungry Hippos, quarters. I did a marshmallow one where they had straws and they did a relay where they had to suck the marshmallows up and take them and put them in a different container. So I change it every time and they have to work together in their groups. They love them. They're really fun. And it gives a chance to maybe groups who are behind to catch up to the other ones. So anything can happen and it's different. So it applies to different strengths. Maybe the students who aren't the rock star academic kids have a chance to shine in these kinds of competitions against the other groups. The battles is where weapons can be used. So at the very end of the Renaissance unit, we're doing a grudge ball review game. And it was like these teams that have been hoarding all their weapons the entire time. Suddenly we're like, I throw a spear at you. And they run up and they slam their spear card down on the table. And so that team now loses a turn, which screws them up because they don't get a chance to answer a question. And that is a disadvantage, right? It's like, oh, well, I have a shield and I block your spear. It's like, oh, well, I throw another spear. And so all of a sudden there's like cards flying everywhere. And kids are like, well, do we save this one or do we use it? And using swords and stuff on each other and armor. And it was such a blast and it was so much fun. And it added a whole nother level to this review game that we've played before, but it made it more fun in a whole new way. So another type of challenge could be like another puzzle. So the last puzzle I gave them, they came into class, I gave them each this sheet and I didn't even say anything. I just gave it to them and I was like, go. I gave them no instructions. And we had just done the Age of Exploration. So these were all anagrams of different words that we'd kind of been discussing. And most of them picked up on that pretty quick. But then they get to these weird numbers at the bottom and they can't figure it out. And after like 5-10 minutes, they're screaming like, what do the numbers mean? And this group was on the right track. And then they figured it out. So second letter of first word, first letter, third letter, fifth letter spells ocean. So one group gets it. They're like, it's ocean, it's ocean. And then they win, right? And they got bonus XP for that. So it wasn't even like a physical kind of game. It was just a mental challenge between groups. Some pictures. So we've done one where they had to pick up Smarties using chopsticks. That was a relay. The Hungry Hippos and quarters. So the quarters one, they could either bounce it into the elimination cup to eliminate a person from the other team, or they could bounce it into the cup with bonus XP. So they kind of had some different strategies for that one there.
It was harder than they thought it was too. I
Yes.
was there that day.
There you go.
Hungry Hippos was actually, I called it Feed Your Horse because in the Renaissance story, they were making the journey from France to Italy. And that's a long journey, so you need to really feed your horse well. So the team that fed their horse the most won and was more successful in their journey. Also, it was right after they went through the Black Death. And so I had them all roll dice to determine whether or not they caught the plague. And if they did catch the plague, they rolled a 1. They got the plague. And then they had to use, I'm like, oh, the plague, it rotted off your hand. So now you have to use your elbow instead of your hand for the game, which made it really hard. So that was just something else I kind of tied in. The storyline is probably one of the more difficult parts, but I think it's really fun, and it sort of humanizes your content and puts your kids in an actual role that they can emotionally connect to. It can be based on real historical events, which is what I do, or it can be entirely in like a made-up land of your choosing. And each new part of the story leads to the next topic or section. So if I go to my journey here, I picked a location, I picked a date that tied in with what we were talking about. I have dialogue, I have pictures, and it is an ongoing story that I added to every single time we were ready to move on to the next quest. And each part of the story sets them up for the quest. So this one talks about how, okay, you're thinking about leaving your village. You want to go explore and see what Europe has to offer you, but you're a peasant. You don't know anything about European geography because you're illiterate. So you need to find someone that can teach you about cartography. So you go talk to the blacksmith. He has an old map he can lend you, but you got to finish filling it in. So you got to figure out how to do that. So every part of the story makes what you're about to do seem meaningful. Like if you were a peasant and you were illiterate and you were given this old terrible map that wasn't filled in, what would you do? So it leads them to their quest. For example, the Black Death one, a village near Paris is concerned about all these people dying and they don't know why, and you said you were going there. So they asked you, would you please create a medical report for them on what you find so that they can learn what precautions to take to protect themselves from the plague? And so it just creates this ongoing story, which went through the entire unit. And it does seem really, really overwhelming, but I just did each piece at a time, and I like doing this because it's fun and it's creative. But whenever I say it's time for the next part of the story, they all listen. Like everyone is silent and everyone is really engaged in what I'm going to tell them is coming next. You can do a story, but it's not required at all, and you could just have each new quest be the next part of the story if you wanted. So that is everything I do in my classroom. It's bit of a bigger scale. So if you wanted to keep things more simple, there's some other things you can do like Breakout EDU, which is more of a 1 lesson or 1 day kind of activity, and RPG, role-playing games, in which every student is a character with a certain amount of health and they have to fight each other. It's like kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons sort of style game. This would work really well for math. I did it for social, but in math, you could have them solving math equations or math problems in order to attack the other teams or do calculations. Science, you could have them answering different questions, same kind of thing. We played through the story of the 7 Years' War, the Battle on the Plains of Abraham. I had the French and the British, 2 different sides. One person was James Wolfe, one was Montcalm. They are the leaders of the army. And they went through the whole actual story, fighting each other for control of New France. So they love this kind of stuff. It's so much more fun. I've loved doing it. And if I could do it in more than one class, I definitely would, because I look at like what Scott Hebert does in his classroom is amazing. And I would do it if I had more than one section of the same class. So he teaches 4 blocks of Science 8 every day. So his classroom is like a medieval land. He's completely transformed it. And I don't really have that option, but he's got really great resources on his YouTube channel. He talks a lot about how he does his gamification. His blog has a lot of stuff on there too. And then I've got my 2 websites for the units that I've done so far, which are accessible by the public, and all my assignments are on there so people can use them. And that is gamification in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kaylee.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
I close this now?
Let's close that.
The window in the window in the window.